Greetings and salutations friends, and welcome to a slightly different video. As many of you know, there's a couple of things going on right now and I need to get my car on the road, but I've recently run into a minor problem. Every now and again, the ignition control sensor, ignition control module will burn out, which is not very helpful because, it does need to be running in order for the car to run. So, first of all, what the hell am I talking about? And secondly, what am I going to do about it? So, what is this thing that I'm talking about? Well, in this, by the way, this is the inside of my MGB. Ignore the label up there that says Nissan. This is a Franken motor. And that's a Franken exhaust system. We'll get to that later. So, in this distributor housing, there is this little guy here. Now this controls when the coil fires and sends signals down the wires to the spark plugs. The problem is when this gets hot, there's a chip in there, there's little microchips in there. When this thing gets hot, it burns out, and when it burns out, it no longer tells this when to fire, and so you no longer get signals down to the spark plugs, which means the spark plugs don't spark, and consequently your engine just does not run. Which means, hang on, I've got to get this lined up again. There we go. Now, one thing I noticed the other day was that the headers are right next to this guy, which means when I stop driving, I turn the car off and walk off because the fan isn't running at the front. This tends to get very hot, and this doesn't help. So what I did was I actually went off and I got some titanium wrap, and you might be noticing these cheap ass things here. These were actually like a pack of these was $5, and there was like 8 of them in it. Or you can buy the actual steel holders that are designed to go with this stuff, right? You can buy those steel holders, and I think it's a pack 4 for $10. So I went with the cheap option because I'm very, very cheap. That, and this is a stopgap solution. I actually wrapped these with the headers in place because to take these headers off is a virtual nightmare, and I wasn't going to go to the trouble of taking them off and wrapping them and then putting them back on again because, like I said, it's a real pain in the nards. And yes, the reason it looks a bit weird in here is because I sprayed them down whilst they were in place. That's why technically you should take this off. Anyway, so the next thing I thought about was a lot of cars have aluminum baffles over their headers. And I thought, well, why can't I do that? This is enough to deal with the issue, but I'm going to put this baffle on just for the S and G's of it, hopefully. Anyway, I'm going to cut myself out a template. Okay, so we've got an interesting piece of square card now. This actually will fit quite nicely in here, and I can bend it around a little bit like that, and it will actually shroud pretty well. The problem is, of course, you've got to get it to stay in place, but I do have access to these 2 bolts, and what I can do is make myself a little notch, fold it over, and put it underneath these 2 bolts. What I'm going to do is pull the bolt away this way. I'm not going to pull the header off. If you pull the header off and try and put it behind the header, you create a little gap behind the header and the engine, and that gap is going to cause all kinds of fantastic problems. So I'm going to put it on this side and then bolt it down quite tightly. So let me get these notches figured out, and it should work pretty well, I think. Right, so this seems to be pretty close to what I need. I've got the 2 notches here, which you can see I've kind of got little marks on them where I've squashed them up against the bolts. So what I should be able to do is, and I've also trimmed it down a little bit too, is once it's in, bend it round and line it up with those bolts, and it will create quite a nice little heat baffle and stop the heat transfer, or stop the heat radiating up towards that thing. So that is all I need. So what I can do now I've got this, I can just run to my local hardware store and find a piece of aluminum about this size. Okay, so I went to the store, I took my little template with me, and I matched it up to a couple of different things. If you go to the sheet metal section in your local hardware store, you can usually find some high-grade, pretty thick aluminum for a very large amount of money. The steel plate is obviously slightly less expensive, but still more than you really want to pay, or more than I want to pay for this very, very simple heat baffle. So I engaged my little grey thing, little being the operative word, and I wandered around the store for a little bit. And over in the roofing section, I came across flashing. 35 cents. If I flatten it out, I actually got two pieces in case it went wrong. If I flatten it out, it's about the right size. So, got a little friend here. I'm going to flatten that out, and we will put in the little notches, and we'll see where we end up. Alright, 30 seconds later, you can see I've now quite nicely flattened this thing. I've drawn on where my notches are going to be. Basically, these are the bits that stick out. Right, so I realized that I had folded this the wrong way. I wanted the longer tang at the top side of the motor and the shorter tang at the bottom side, so it would go in like that. And then I cut these notches so I can fit this tang around the bolt. Right, so now I've got these out though. I've just unhooked the wires from the little clampy things here, so just to get them out of the way. I've loosened this up so I can get in behind that one, and I've done the same down here with this one. I used a combination of my breaker bar and my little wrench, or a little ratchet, to do it, so it should be fine. Now all I've got to do is feed my little piece of aluminum sheet into here and into here, get it to bend around, and then I can worry about moving these. Okie dokie, so we've got our little bit of aluminum heat baffle installed. I trimmed it back a little bit so I could still get to the dipstick for the oil. These seem to be okay. I mean, they sit up above it. Oh, hello. I must have moved that one. Plug that back in again. There we go. So, there we go. Want to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that they don't come down too far. Looks like they're okay. I'm probably going to spray this edge here so it's not sharp. But this should baffle a lot of the heat from this guy and stop it from reaching my distributor cap. It looks a little trashy, like I said, but when I get some time and some energy, I'm going to end up popping this entire header assembly off and rewrapping the entire thing properly and making sure I've got enough wrap to do the fourth cylinder anyway. But that's that. So let's fire up and see what happens. Well, it's not flapping around like I thought it might, which is good. Although I did tighten those bolts down quite nicely, so... Ow! I got a hit off of one of the lines there. All right, so that's good. I got to keep an eye on it. There's a little bit of tearing right there, but that's why I purchased 2 of them. Yay! Because I'm not stupid. Well, actually, I am stupid because I'm doing this. But with any luck, this will stop the heat from these 2 pipes from getting to this when the engine is off after I've run it for a long time. So I ran around the corner to get some beer and just run the car a little bit so I could stick my hand in there and see what the temperatures are like. So let's have a quick look. Right, sticking my hand in. Yes, it's still very, very warm, but over here it is decidedly cooler now. I can actually get my hand in here and it's not burning, which is really good. It means that this is actually running cooler now. The only reason this is getting hot is because when the engine is running, it's going to get hot anyway, but also when the thing in there is firing, it's generating heat. But yeah, this has actually worked really well. The thing itself is, yes, it's very hot, but the amount of heat coming from there out this way has been dramatically reduced, which means I don't have to worry about the chip in here overheating anymore when I shut the engine off. Hooray! So, as messy as it is, I think that's mission accomplished. I mean, it does look pretty shoddy, like I said. In the future, when I'm gonna take those headers off, I'll actually redo that plate, so it'll look a lot better. But yeah, I'm quite happy with that. It should stop my what is it, ignition control module from frying now. So yay! I don't have to run to the store every week to get a replacement. I had actually wanted to get some imagery of the engine while it was cold and hot with my FLIR 1 camera, but I forgot to charge it. So maybe next time I'll take a look at it. But it's gonna be tricky. Actually, what I could do is before I wrap this tube here, this header here, I could get some imagery of that before and after I wrap it, just to give you an idea. But I will say, actually, this titanium wrap that I've put on here, kind of half-assed put on here, but it's on, has actually made a big difference to the engine. My gas mileage is slightly better, but that's also because this thing isn't overheating. The gas mileage is slightly better, the horsepower output has slightly increased, and the engine running temperature when I'm doing about 60 is definitely a lot lower than it was. So if you have the time and inclination to wrap your headers, I would actually go ahead and do it. Thanks for joining me on this rather weird experimentation and nonsensory. If you want to see more about this car and what I go through to keep the damn thing running, because like I said, it is a bit of a Franken engine and it is a bit of a Franken car. Like I said, I think this is a Nissan 240 motor with a Nissan gearbox in an old MGB. And there are remarkable issues with it that come up every now and again, like this nonsense over here. Oh dear, that's a different story. Anyway, for the minute, I will see you anon.